There's a reason you've always felt different. Even if you couldn't explain it, even if you tried to ignore it, even if you did everything in your power to fit in, you've always known something was off with this world. Something in you couldn't fully engage in the games people play. You saw through the masks. You felt the energy behind people's words. You sensed things before they happened. And what you thought was a curse, what made you feel isolated, was actually a mark. Not a physical one, but a spiritual signature and invisible imprint on your soul. You are part of an ancient lineage that doesn't belong to any bloodline or culture. You belong to a spiritual order that transcends time and tradition. You're not just awake, you're chosen. You're part of God's elite 1%, the bridge between light and dark, heaven and earth, seen and unseen. But let's be clear, this is not about ego. This isn't about superiority. In fact, if you're truly part of this 1%, you've suffered more than most. You've walked through fire. You've experienced levels of pain, betrayal, confusion, and inner conflict that would have crushed most people. But you're still here. That alone is a sign. The world tried to break you, bend you, bury you, but you kept rising. Not because you're invincible, but because there's a mission inside you that refuses to die. That's the first sign, resilience without explanation. You've survived what others couldn't, and somehow you didn't just survive, you transformed. You alchemized pain into wisdom, loss into clarity, darkness into depth. The second sign is a relentless inner conflict between two worlds. You feel the pull of the material world, the cravings, the distractions, the roles you're expected to play. But at the same time, there's something ancient in your spirit that won't let you forget who you really are. You try to numb it. You've tried to silence it. You've tried to fit into the matrix. But the more you do, the more you feel like you're dying inside. That's not your imagination. That's your soul resisting the lie. Because you were never meant to fully belong here. You're a traveler, a messenger, a guardian of light who had to enter the shadow to understand it, not to be consumed by it, but to transmute it. And here's where it gets deeper. The third sign is a magnetic pull toward truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. While others cling to illusions for safety, you feel compelled to rip off the blindfold, even if it hurts. You're not satisfied with surface-level spirituality. You crave the real thing. You want to sit at the edge of the void and hear God speak, not through dogma, but through direct experience. You're not looking for comfort, you're looking for clarity. And that means you've probably gone through periods of intense deconstruction where everything you believed was torn down so something more real could emerge. That's not a spiritual failure. That's the divine rebuilding your foundation from the inside out, so you can stand on truth, not tradition. The fourth sign is a connection to both light and dark without being owned by either. This is one of the most misunderstood traits of the chosen. You've seen darkness, not just in the world, but in yourself. You've touched your own shadow, your own rage, your own desires, your own fears. And instead of pretending they don't exist, you've learned to face them. That's what makes you powerful, not that you're pure, but that you're integrated. You walk with angels, but you also understand demons, not to worship them, but to disarm them. You are a bridge, a mediator. A soul who can walk into the darkest places and carry light without being swallowed. That's rare. That's sacred. And now we come to the fifth sign. Your energy affects people in ways you can't explain. You've noticed it. People either feel incredibly drawn to you or deeply triggered by you. There's rarely a neutral response. That's because your presence activates something in others. You mirror back their deepest truths and their deepest wounds without even trying. Sometimes you intimidate people just by being yourself. Sometimes strangers open up to you with secrets they've never told another soul. You carry a frequency that disrupts illusions and awakens dormant parts of people. And that's not always comfortable for you or for them, but it's part of the assignment. You didn't come here to be liked. You came here to awaken. The sixth sign is your life is orchestrated by invisible hands. When you look back, you can see how every detour, Every heartbreak, every mistake carried a deeper purpose. The job you didn't get, the relationship that ended, the breakdown that shattered your identity, it all led to this moment. You're not random. You're not lost. You're being guided by a force that sees 10 steps ahead. And even when you doubted, even when you resisted, even when you rebelled, grace kept finding you. Synchronicities, dreams, sudden insights, moments when the universe cracked open just enough to remind you, you were never alone. The elite 1% don't walk a straight path. They walk a divinely chaotic one because they're being shaped for something greater than comfort. They're being shaped for impact. And the seventh sign, the one that confirms everything, is this. You've felt the presence of the divine within yourself. Not as a concept, not as something outside of you, but as you, in moments of deep stillness in the middle of chaos, or even when you were at your lowest. You've touched something eternal inside yourself, a quiet knowing, a sacred fire, a voice that said, keep going. You're not done yet. That voice wasn't your imagination. It was the echo of your higher self. It was the divine reminding you who you are. So now I ask you, if you are part of God's elite 1%, what are you here to do with that awareness? Because knowing is not enough. This calling demands action. It demands presence. It demands that you become the bridge between light and dark, not by preaching, but by embodying. Not by escaping the world, but by transforming it from within. You are not here to play small. You are not here to wait for permission. You are here to activate, to awaken, to lead. And the world is watching.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
If you are one of God's elite 1%, then you already know this truth in your bones, that pain was never random. It was never meaningless. It wasn't karma punishing you or fate being cruel. It was a forging, a sacred fire. Because the soul that is called to carry divine power must first be purified by divine pressure. We don't gain wisdom by reading about it, we earn it through breaking, through losing what we thought we needed, through having everything we depended on stripped away until all that's left is what's real. That's the fire. And while others run from it, we were called to walk through it. Look at your life. Really look. Every wound, every betrayal, every rejection, every moment where you felt invisible, it wasn't destroying you, it was refining you. You didn't just go through pain. You became something through it. It carved you open. It expanded your capacity. It taught you the things no book or teacher could. It forced you to see what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The depth of your own soul. That's why the elite 1% are dangerous in the best way. We've already died 1,000 deaths. There's nothing left to fear. And in that fearlessness we find power most people can't even comprehend. But here's the part most people miss. Pain doesn't just break us down, it breaks us open. It opens channels in us that were once blocked. It cracks the shell of the ego so the light of the soul can pour through. If you've ever wept so deeply that it felt like your entire being was unraveling, then you've known that sacred moment when grief becomes grace, when surrender becomes strength, when your lowest point becomes your launching point. That's not weakness. That's divine engineering. And the more intense the pain, the more profound the power waiting on the other side. You see, the world teaches us to numb pain, to silence it, to run from it at all costs. But those of us who are chosen, we don't run. We listen. We sit in the fire. We let it burn away everything false. Because we know that pain is a portal, not to suffering but to sight. It gives you eyes to see what others miss. It gives you compassion that can't be faked. It humbles you in a way that makes you trustworthy. Do you understand that? Your suffering has made you trustworthy in the eyes of the divine. That's why you're being called. That's why you're being activated. Because power without pain becomes arrogance. But power forged through pain becomes wisdom. And that wisdom, it's not about knowing facts. It's about knowing freedom, real freedom, The kind that can sit in darkness and still radiate light. The kind that doesn't need to control anyone or prove anything. The kind that can hold space for others to break because you've broken too. That's why people feel safe around you. That's why even strangers feel seen in your presence. Because your pain taught you how to see. Not just with your eyes, but with your soul. And that is a divine gift this world desperately needs. Here's what most people don't realize. The pain didn't just shape you for your personal growth. It prepared you for your assignment. You didn't go through hell just to survive. You went through it so you could come back with keys. Keys to healing, to awakening, to remembering. You are not just a survivor, you're a carrier of codes, a carrier of light, a bridge between the broken and the whole. You're here to guide others across the threshold you crossed alone. So let me ask you something. What if the very thing you've been trying to forget is the exact thing you're meant to use to liberate others? What if the wound you've been hiding is the doorway to someone else's healing? What if your story in all its rawness and imperfection is the medicine someone else has been praying for? You see, the elite 1% don't rise by being perfect. We rise by being real, by being honest, by letting our scars be seen not as signs of weakness, but as symbols of victory. And here's the paradox of divine power. The more broken you've been, the more whole you can become. Because in that brokenness, you lost the illusions. You lost the masks. You lost the need to be anything other than true. That's why people trust you. That's why you're being positioned now. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've walked through the questions and lived through them. That's what makes your light credible. That's what makes your presence transformative. So if you're still carrying shame over your past, if you still feel unworthy because of what you've been through, release it now. Let it go. Every fall was part of the rise. Every mistake was part of the map. You are not behind. You are right on time. And everything you've been through has been preparing you for this next level, this next chapter, this next calling. Because here's the truth. The fire didn't destroy you because it couldn't. You're not just human. You're divine intelligence wrapped in skin. You're a spark of God learning how to burn without being consumed. And now, after everything, the fire that once hurt you lives inside you, not to destroy, but to illuminate. You are the fire now. You are the light in the darkness. And the world is waiting for you to remember. There is a point in every chosen soul's life when everything starts falling apart, not gently, not gradually, but like a divine wrecking ball crashing through the illusion of who you thought you were. Relationships dissolve, plans collapse, stability vanishes. And you're left standing in the center of what feels like ruins, asking, why is this happening to me? But what if I told you, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you? What if the chaos wasn't a curse, but a calling? What if the divine had to disrupt your life to elevate your soul? This is the part of the journey few talk about because it's not glamorous. It's raw, it's lonely, it's filled with confusion, grief, and the silent scream of a soul in transition. But this disruption is sacred. It's the pruning before the blooming. It's the breaking before the becoming. God does not destroy what you are. He removes what you are not. And sometimes the only way to get your attention is to take away the very things that numbed your connection to your purpose. That's why the job ended. That's why the relationship crumbled. That's why the old life stopped working, because you outgrew it. And your soul knew it before your mind was ready to admit it. You see, the elite 1% are not just awakened, they are recalibrated. And recalibration requires disruption. You have to be pulled away from what is familiar to make room for what is divine. You can't build a sacred life on a foundation of fear, codependency, or false identity. So the universe, in its infinite wisdom, begins to strip you. It removes the roles you performed to be accepted. It dismantles the systems you depended on for validation. At first, it feels like abandonment, but in time, you'll see it was alignment. The divine wasn't punishing you. It was preparing you. And this preparation often looks like isolation, like silence, like wilderness. You start to feel disconnected from everyone and everything you once loved. But this is not a punishment. This is a sacred pause, a divine cocoon. You've been pulled away to be rewired, not rejected. Because who you're becoming cannot emerge in the noise of your old life. God needed you alone so He could speak without interference, so He could pour into you directly, so He could clean out the residue of a life that no longer reflects your essence. The disruption is not just about removing people or places, it's about removing illusions. You begin to see things clearly, not just out there, but in here. You see where you betrayed your intuition to keep the peace. You see how you played small to make others comfortable. You see how your loyalty to the past kept you from stepping into your future. And this clarity, though painful, is the greatest gift you could ever receive. Because once you see, you can never unsee. And that vision becomes your power. But here's the divine irony. While you feel like you're losing everything, what's actually happening is that you're being positioned, you're being set apart. You're being pulled away from average because you were never meant to live an average life. You're not here to repeat cycles. You're here to break them. You're not here to blend in. You're here to stand out, not for attention, but for activation. And that requires a level of solitude and surrender most people will never understand. But you will, because deep down you've always known you didn't come here to follow the script. You came here to rewrite it. So let me ask you something. What if your detour was the real path all along? What if the thing you called failure was the very thing that cracked open your destiny? What if your delay was divine timing in disguise? Too often we judge the disruption before it's done working. We label it loss when it's actually love. We call it chaos when it's actually construction. But the soul knows. The soul remembers. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the whisper beneath the wreckage. This is not the end. This is the beginning of who you really are. The elite 1% are not just chosen, they are tested. Not because God is cruel, but because the weight of their calling demands strength, clarity, and depth. You can't carry light to others if you haven't found it in your own darkness. You can't lead people out of the fire if you've never walked through it yourself. That's why your life has never been easy. That's why you've always felt different. That's why the disruption came not to break you, but to build you into a vessel that can hold divine power without leaking it. And now, after everything, you're starting to feel it, aren't you? That quiet shift. That sense that something bigger is awakening inside you. That the storm wasn't meant to drown you, it was meant to baptize you. To cleanse you of the past. To raise you into your next level. You're not who you were. And the world hasn't even seen who you're becoming. But it will. Because you're not just coming back. You're coming through with more light, more purpose, and more clarity than ever before. So the next time life pulls you away, don't panic. Don't fight it. Ask instead, what is this disruption trying to deliver me into? What version of me is being born through this breaking? Because if you can sit in the mystery long enough, if you can trust the invisible hands that are shaping your destiny, you'll find that the very things that once broke you were the same things that built your throne. There comes a moment, a quiet, undeniable moment when you realize you're no longer waiting to be saved. You're no longer hoping for someone else to see you, validate you, or give you permission. Something inside clicks, and in that click, everything changes. You stop asking, why me? And start declaring, why not me? You feel the weight of your story, your scars, your journey not as a burden, but as blueprints. You are no longer the wounded. You are no longer the seeker. You have become the architect, the builder, the bridge. You've returned to your original design. This is what stepping into your divine authority feels like. Not like ego, not like domination, but like alignment, like remembering. Like coming home to a version of you that was always present, just buried beneath layers of noise, fear, and forgetting. You're not becoming something new. You're becoming something ancient, something eternal. And now you carry yourself differently. You move with intention. You speak with weight. You don't chase energy. You generate it. Not to manipulate, but to guide. not to control, but to create. The authority you now hold isn't about being above anyone. It's about being responsible for your light. You've seen the darkness. You've walked through shadow. You've experienced collapse. And now you carry a frequency that others can feel without you saying a word. That's divine authority, not loud, not boastful, but undeniable. People notice the shift. They may not understand it, but they sense it. You're no longer asking for a seat at the table. You are the table. You're no longer trying to fit in. You've remembered you were sent to stand out, to design something new. And with that remembrance comes responsibility. You don't get to play small anymore. You don't get to pretend you're confused when you're just afraid. You don't get to hide behind doubt when you've already been shown too much. You've been entrusted with vision, with voice, with presence. So now the question becomes, what will you build? Who will you become? What will you awaken in this world that only you can? Because the elite 1% aren't here to escape the world. They're here to reshape it, not by force but by frequency, not by pushing but by being. Your life becomes the message, your healing becomes the ripple, your embodiment becomes the revolution. Yes, you'll still face resistance. Yes, you'll still feel fear. But now you know who you are, and that knowing becomes your compass, your center, your throne. And here's the greatest paradox. The more power you access, the more humble you become. Not because you're shrinking, but because you finally understand the magnitude of what you carry. You recognize that you're not the source, you're the conduit. That divine intelligence moves through you, not just for you. That your voice, your art, your presence, it's not just self-expression. It's service. And through that service, you rise. So I ask you right here, right now, what are you waiting for? The signs have been there. The fire has refined you. The disruptions have cleared the path. The veil has lifted. You've returned to the architect of your own reality. It's time to build, to lead, to become. Not tomorrow, not one day, now. Because the world isn't waiting for someone better. It's waiting for you, remembered, risen and fully awake. You are the 1%. Now walk like it.